Okay, picking back up with the conclusion, we finished the refutation part of our sample essay. We're still on page 125. Let's hear the conclusion. They restate the thesis. Edmund should not have followed the White Witch because he purposely ignored a warning, carelessly overlooked the White Witch, and secretly followed Lucy into Narnia. Edmund caused tremendous trouble, not only for himself, but worse, for his siblings and for all of Narnia. Okay. The conclusion, you see, the true conclusion, corresponds with the original thesis from the introduction and the three true proofs. We leave behind the reasoning of the refutation at the end of the refutation paragraph. Okay? Now let's take a look at our now that we know where we're going, let's take a look at our step-by-step guide to how to create our refutation. It sounds like I'm saying reputation, doesn't it? But this is the word refutation. It has an F. To refute. To refute means to show the flaw in your opponent's argument. And I speak in terms of opponents a lot because I am always like thinking like plaintiff versus defendant. So I'm always like thinking A-V, B versus B. So that's why I just frame things like that. So I'm on page 300 of my student work text. I've moved now to my white binder. I'm done with my LTW essay sample. Guide to refutation. What are we going to do? Number 1, write your thesis. Simply write it out. This just gets it out on paper for you to work with in this exercise. 2, write a counter thesis. Your counter thesis should be parallel to your thesis, just the opposite. Don't get creative and flowery. Just do a simple parallel counter thesis. Number 3, choose one strong proof that supports the counter thesis. So I gave you guys an example of this in the Google Classrooms post from, I think it was Tuesday, about refutation. I used Julius Caesar. My thesis was that Julius Caesar should have returned to the Senate. And if you guys want to go back and look at that. And then I had one or two it says a strong proof that supports the counter thesis. You don't want it to be too strong or too firmly put, though, because obviously you're only proposing it so that you can then knock it down. You can see how this kind of persuasive technique is working itself out. Then list 3 sub-proofs of this kind of straw man counter thesis, this weak counter thesis. I'm sorry, 3 strong sub-proofs of your proof of your counter thesis. You won't use all of them, but let's just get it on paper to get the creative juices working. Then, now here's the critical thinking part. Here's the part that separates the, shall we say, the men from the boys, the women from the girls, right? This is where you show that you are a mature thinker and you're a critical reader. Explain why this proof is not persuasive. Find a flaw in an argument that you are conceding is valid. You're conceding that it has an appearance, at least, of validity and that it's at least presentable. But now you're diving deeper and showing, you take a closer look, closer analysis, this argument falls flat. And that takes really critical thinking, it takes confidence, and it takes maturity. So that's why you would never see this technique or challenge in like a class lower than like 8th or 9th grade, because this is a difficult, it's difficult to think this critically and to write with confidence in this way. Okay, so if you're not 100% sure about it, you're just learning, that's okay. You'll get there. This is This is a hard technique. This is what lawyers do, okay? Number 4, choose a second proof that supports that counter thesis that you're ultimately going to knock down. Do your 3 subproofs. Now, I want you to stop right now and I want you to think. Let's think. Where will we turn for these counter proofs? Where is our resource for this? Think about what we have invented and generated so far for Essay 6. Are you thinking the opposite column of your Annie chart to the position you took? I hope so. That would be a great place to source these counter proofs for the counter thesis. Obviously, the A, if you took the in position, the A would be your source for your counter theses. For your counter thesis proofs. Again, explain why the proof is not persuasive. I'm still on page 300. Okay. Do you see how that step-by-step process that was just set forth in the worksheet for refutation can translate to our sample with Edmund and Lucy in the Turkish Delight? What did they do? They introduced the thesis. We're going to recap quickly our, so we're going to see how this exercise is reflected in the sample essay, and then we'll close, okay? I just want you to make that connection. First, we have the thesis. Is the thesis part of the refutation in the sample essay? No. The only reason the curriculum has you writing down your thesis is so that you can generate a good counter thesis, and you've got it right there in front of you, okay? It's our counter thesis that we're working with. Some people say that counter thesis. Some people say that Julius Caesar should not have returned to the Senate. Okay? Then we're introducing now the proof, right? They argue, we're introducing it with the word they argue. That way you're not espousing these words and making them your own. You are showing that these are some other people that aren't present between you and your reader, you and your audience, that you and your audience know better. These are some other people someplace else, right? They argue that the White Witch took care of Edmund, feeding him Turkish delight and speaking kindly to him. Our imaginary essay composer has collapsed the 3 subproofs, A, B, and C, into just one little statement there. And that's fine. She's probably picked just one and kind of mentioned maybe the second. You don't need to do all 3. You just need to have some support for your proof, okay? Now we get into explain why this proof is not persuasive. However, this idea is inadequate. Just use those same words. When you're introducing your explanation of why the proof is not persuasive, you're poking holes in your opponent's argument, use these same words. I'll look for it in your essay. Then I'll know that you're on your refutation, right? You can get fancy later. Just take the sample and make it your own this time. However, this idea is inadequate because we see the White Witch's true personality later. And then they bring us back to their main thesis. Feeding Edmund Turkish delight and speaking kindly to him was just a means to reaching her evil goal. In addition, now we're on number 4 of 300. Choose a second proof. In addition, people argue that Edmund should have followed the White Witch because he was alone and scared. Thus, he could not use proper judgment. Our imaginary writer has combined all her proof and her attempts at subproof all into one sentence. They're using a semicolon, compound sentence. she goes right into, this argument is also invalid. What word matches invalid in the first refutation paragraph? Do you remember? Inadequate. They used inadequate in paragraph 1, or rather with the first counterproof, and they're using inadequate for the second counterproof. Those are great words. This argument is also invalid because Edmund was not really alone. He had his trustworthy sister Lucy, blah, 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 and then they bring us back. We know that Edmund followed the White Witch out of pride and selfish ambition. Take a look at my post using Julius Caesar as the material and completing a refutation, so you can see how this looks with our Julius Caesar issue that we're writing about this in this essay 6. Finally, our essay writer, our sample says, neither of these arguments, and she briefly restates them using a hyphen. It's not a hyphen, it's actually a dash, using a dash. Neither of these arguments, dash, that the White Witch took care of Edmund and that Edmund was alone and scared, dash, would give Edmund any sufficient reason, another great word, sufficient, to follow the White Witch. And then we go to conclusion. Okay? All right, I hope that sums up refutation for you and that you can take a stab at it on page 300 for your homework this week with your issue for essay 6. And I'll see you guys next time.